In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Gianna from Exabeam. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our new episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to my guest today, Gianna. Gianna, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thanks, Ben. I'm really excited to be here.
Gianna, would you mind to say, in 5-6 sentences, who are you?
Thanks for asking the question. And it's funny because everyone always asks that, and talking about yourself for 5 or 6 sentences is a lot. So I'm going to try to do it in maybe 2 or 3 sentences. So Gianna Driver, I'm the CHRO of a cybersecurity company called Exabeam. And I've been in the HR people space for about 20 years, working for global technology companies, and love what I do.
Okay, that's perfect. And well, can you tell us why you love what you do?
So I feel like HR is this beautiful microcosm of the entire organization. We get to work across all people, all levels, all functions, all geographies, and we get to combine that messy emotional stuff that makes us human with also the business elements here. So thinking about our actions, our activities, our productivity, our ROI, profitability. And I love that intersection that happens. And I believe that we in the HR space, we get to combine all of those together and help organizations create these really fun workplaces where people can be productive and do their best work.
Well, it's very cool what you say. So combining this emotional element of, hey, well, I think it's very important for a company to have a very sound basis of a shared culture on the one side. On the other side, obviously, well, it's about ROI. It's about hiring great people for great organizations. So I think most recently we saw, when people walked out of OpenAI, and everyone was like, okay, well, the company went from 100 billion to basically zero. If all people go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and
So,
you think about that, right? Like employees have power in organizations, especially when we are all collectively working together. We have power as employees. We also have power as consumers, right? Like our purchasing decisions say a lot about our values. So yeah, I love that. I think as an employer and as an officer in the company, that creates a really unique opportunity for us, because we are then tasked with how do we hold both employee morale and sentiment and emotion, and also at the same time fulfill our obligations to shareholders and our investors and our board, right? And I don't think that these two worlds are mutually exclusive. I think that those can be very synergistic and come together nicely if we're thoughtful about it.
And I think it's a super important point you just mentioned. So it's like, well, as a leadership team, in particular at the C level, you have to balance so many interests. You have to balance the interests of clients, employees, stakeholders, shareholders, and you have to be mindful of everyone, which makes it a kind of a multi-dimension challenge, so to say.
Yeah, and that's fun.
Indeed, it is, it's great to see that you really like what you're doing. Can you tell us a bit about your way into HR? So, was it something that you always had in mind as something great to work? How did you start your career there?
Yeah, I like many people in HR, Didn't grow up wanting to be an HR professional. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a doctor. And it's funny because if you survey children and students, I think the majority of them want to be, doctors or teachers or
vets.
firefighters or exactly, yeah, right. But very few say, "Oh, I want to be a total rewards specialist," or "I want to, focus on benefits compliance," or whatever the case may be. Very few people do that. So no, I did not grow up wanting to enter HR. Frankly, I don't know that I had really heard of HR.
Mm-hmm.
I started my career in the corporate world, corporate America, and I was in the commercial insurance space as a risk analyst as part of this rotational leadership program. And I realized very quickly that while insurance fulfills an important need in the market,
Mm-hmm.
not really my cup of tea, not
Mm-hmm.
not what I feel passionate about. Bless those who are very passionate about that. That rocks. That's amazing, and we need you. That wasn't my calling. I started then working at a startup business as employee number 3. And then over time, as we grew, I naturally gravitated toward many of the HR human-centric parts of our business. Because remember, as a company of 3 and then 5 and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50, 100, et cetera, you didn't focus on HR, right? Like I was another business operator. But then as we started to grow, I naturally gravitated toward talent acquisition, toward performance management, like all of these things that over time I realized are housed in this world of HR, this bigger umbrella called the human resources function. And I realized these are the things that give me energy. I truly enjoy coming up with mentorship programs and, thinking through how do we create and incentivize the right behaviors and outcomes that work for employees and for the business. So all of that was naturally energizing for me. And that's when, thankfully, early in my career, I started to figure out what I was passionate about and then did more and more of that. And here we are 20 years later, and I still love it. And it's evolved and changed so much.
Well, I think you mentioned something super important. How to motivate people, how to set the right incentive schemes in place. How did you approach that? Given, well, as I said, grow an organization from 3 to 5 to 10 to 30 people, it kind of, well, every state is so different from the previous state.
Yes.
So being a team of 5 to 6 people, it's like all very close. Being a team of 15 people, you already have like several management layers to keep everyone aligned, to keep everyone motivated. How did you approach this?
Yeah, I think there are these milestones in an organization's evolution that are almost like these pivotal moments where in a step function fashion, the company needs to evolve and change. And to speak very specifically, I'll give you some examples. When you are a company of, call it 15, even 30 people big, you can have team meetings, like or get company-wide meetings, and do that at a restaurant. You can have offsites or, and it's just logistically easy, but it's also very easy from a communications standpoint. But as you start to become a more complex organization, meaning you have, call it, 50 people or 100 people, leaders then need to become very intentional around how do we cascade information to people, because there will be implicit in that size, there will be an asymmetry of information. Not everyone will have the same information at the same time. So being very intentional around how you communicate is very important. Yeah, okay, I'll pause.
One question, and the thing is like, well, not everyone has the same information. However, if same information is shared with everyone, since people might not know the story behind that piece of information, it might be seen as completely different and might cause lots of confusion, maybe even
Yes.
anxiety.
Exactly, which is why being very thoughtful about how you communicate information. And there's the context, and then there's the actual content. And both are equally important. And contextualizing information as you're sharing it allows the receiver to really then internalize and receive and truly hear you. And you're right, as you start to become larger and larger, and then you throw in different countries and cultures and geographies and time zones and other things, the context under which people are, receiving this information is very different. And then I think it becomes all the more important that leadership is mindful and aware of what we're sharing, when we're sharing, and that we're equitably sharing appropriate information with everyone.
How did you experience the development of your organization back then when you felt, okay, well, things are changing and it's me communicating a lot with our employees, well, doing everything to make sure they are on board with our vision. They are also participate in improving the company. I think there's also incredible opportunity in smart people's opinion to develop a company. So how did you experience that?
Well, so in the very early days, I spent a lot of time myself, because we were a small company and didn't have a lot of headcount. I was the HR business partner. I was the recruiter. Oh, and I did benefits and payroll on the side, and anything learning and development related, I did in my free time, right? So everything was kind of, like I was a one-woman shop. What's beautiful about that is you start to get a really solid survey knowledge about how to do a lot of these different things. And, that on the ground firsthand knowledge allowed me to have a lot of touch points with our employees, right? Because I was working with them in the early stages of the employee life cycle before they were even an employee, they were candidates, but then also like onboarding. And then once they were an employee and, up through and including the end of life cycle, as well as people were transitioning out. So that was a great experience and very formative, because I realized all of the different evolving needs of an employee as they, course through the life cycle. I think what happens is over time, as the company matures, you want to understand what makes the culture special. So what is it that is the razzle dazzle effect that, entices people to join, and how do you keep that alive during all of the phases of growth? But then as I started to progress in my career and the organization started to grow, yes, I hired other people. And I think what's interesting about that process is, for me as a leader, I had to learn how to transition from being this individual contributor who was doing a ton of different things herself to then managing and leading first a person, and then, a small team, and then, larger and larger teams of people to do things that I used to do and that I frankly had opinions about, but I had to then, take some seats back, delegate and empower, and then trust and hold them accountable, knowing that they were doing things differently than how I was doing them, historically. So that was a learning curve for me.
How do you delegate tasks successfully? So one, I think in particular, when it's the first time you delegate in size, so to say, so it's always, well, comes very often with a bit of anxiety. Hey, will people do stuff that, well, meet my standards? Will other people be disappointed in the end? I'm responsible. So how did you approach this?
So I like to think about what does success look like? Like, let's define the objective. And what I told, and actually what I still tell my teams today, is how you go about getting there, I'm going to leave to you. If you have questions, if you want to check in about things, or like I'm here to support and enable that. But I'm not going to micromanage, like, someone looking over your shoulder all the time to say, oh, like, oh no, like you did this wrong, or this is great, or whatever. That's
an
not what
amazing experience, right?
Oh my goodness. And, instead, what I get excited about is hiring really smart, talented people and explaining to them our shared mission, what we're trying to accomplish is this North Star. your piece of this is, this element here. Maybe it's total rewards. And so what we want to do is articulate a compensation philosophy to, all of our employees. How they do all of that, I want them to figure out, right? So I empower and entrust them, but then we, like there's an accountability cycle. So I guess, Ben, to summarize, I think being clear about the objectives and what success looks like, and then having regular touch points as your direct reports are going about accomplishing that task is really important. But it's critical that we empower those on our teams to do the things that we hired them to do.
Okay, I love that. Well, I also think that empowerment of people is probably the greatest strength of an organization. So to leverage all the capacity, all the knowledge, all this motivation within a company. How do you ensure that everyone, not just in your team, but overall in the company, feels empowered to voice their opinion, to be proactive, to create ideas, to implement ideas?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And therefore I'm asking. So
Yes. So I believe that it starts by having really candid conversations with the senior most leader and leadership team. And so I'll be very specific about us here at Exabeam. It starts by my CEO, Adam, and I being in very close sync and communication about our values and about our ways of working and engaging. Like, these are the behaviors and actions, and this is how we want to show up. This is okay. These other things are not okay, and that's not how we work with each other and with the broader company. But then, aside from the CEO and CHRO relationship, there being very open and transparent, I think the rest of the leadership team also needs to embrace what I'm referring to as psychological safety. So being able to have hard conversations in very kind and respectful ways, understanding that we are the team, and like, it's not one, like, me against them or these two people against each other. It's us collectively as one organization, as one team, out trying to solve problems X, Y, and Z together. And then once there's that alignment at the very senior most levels, and we're clear about our ways of working, then I think what happens is that starts to translate and percolate throughout the entire company. And I'll conversely, what I'll say is, when there's not that alignment and buy-in at the very, very top, then the world's best CHROs and chief people officers can do all that they would like to do. But ultimately, I think it is very hard to have a culture of empowerment and engagement, high productivity, authenticity, if it's not embodied by the senior most leaders. So I think that is mission critical and very important.
is that something that, well, people can learn? So when being mindful of our listeners, or maybe some of our listeners might say, well, I would love my CEO, my management team to be more mindful of that fact. And I would want them to be more empowering and be more open to that. Is that something that you, as a CHRO, as a senior HR leader, can guide your C-level colleagues to?
Yeah. So I believe the answer to that is yes, if so it's not yes, period. It's yes, semicolon or comma, if they are open. Because what I've experienced and what I've witnessed and seen is perfection doesn't exist in anybody. In myself, in any CEO I've ever met, and any C-level, leadership team I've ever met, perfection is non-existent. But if someone is self-aware and they are open to learning, truly open. Now, a lot of people will give lip service to their openness to learn. That's not useful. I mean, a truly open mind and open heart, where you really are willing to go to hard places and analyze how you show up in meetings, and how you make other people feel. Like all of these kind of really hard topics, if someone's willing to go there, and they've got the humility to say, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. Absolutely, Ben, 100%. We can work on, giving them skills, tools, ways to check themselves, stop mechanisms. All of those things can absolutely be learned.
Well, being one of the first employees of a growing company makes you obviously emotionally very attached to what you do, I guess. And also, well, lots of the stuff you have built over the years is then well, part of your identity and vice versa. How do you make sure that values develop in line with the company's growth?
Do you mean my values or the
Or
value I bring, or what do you mean?
sorry, I meant the company values that well, should serve as kind of a guiding star for people in the organization, in particular for people who just joined the organization or are about to join the organization.
Yeah, so I think that in general, the values that a company comes up with in its early days are, in my observation and in my experience, usually right for the first, call it 5 to 7-ish years. And then after that, I think a little bit of a refresh is often needed, because what you find is that these kind of pivot points, right? Like those step functions we talked about in an organization's evolution and growth, often you are fundamentally a different company at 500 people than where you were at 100 people or 50 people. And so I'm not saying that the values that work at 100 people don't work at 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 people. I'm saying that what works at 100 or 500 person organization often needs to be tweaked a little bit, and there needs to be a little bit of a refresh or a kind of a and evolving of the values to be right and appropriate for that next phase of growth. And a lot of times, the needs and the focus areas of a smaller organization are very like here and now. You're focused on survival, on getting the basics down, and that's where you should be focused, right? Like that's important. But then over time, it's about, okay, delighting our customers. It's like the things that you're looking to do and to scale become different as the organization grows.
Is this something where you would say that over the last few years, looking back, okay, well, we should have done something different. So with the benefit of hindsight, well, back then, to the best of our knowledge, we did something, and then in the end, we found out, okay, well, we should have been more cautious, or we should have acted different.
So thanks for asking this question. I guess I have a couple quick, like knee-jerk kind of thoughts and reactions. The first one is, most often what I have observed is, in hindsight, most leaders and organizations would say they wish they had acted sooner on, insert whatever that is. It could be an employee-centric thing. It could be a product-centric thing. It could be a market dynamic. Like it could be any number of different, sorts of things. But the majority of times, I do see in hindsight that leaders of very successful companies say, oh gosh, I wish that I'd acted sooner. And I think what happens is we like to get as much data and information as possible. But I think sometimes as leaders, we have to understand, waiting to have complete information might mean that the right moments pass us by, as opposed to saying we have enough information that we can confidently say, this is what we believe and what we think. And then having the courage to say, oh, we tried something and maybe that didn't work. So, okay, great. Well, let's be honest about that and course correct and pivot and shift and do something else. The organizations that do that and do that well, I find, end up really thriving and having very engaged, productive workforces where people are excited to go and try things and do things, as opposed to those who are fearful. And it's almost like they have analysis paralysis, where they need all of the information to make a decision. Well, guess what? You're never going to have 100% of the information with which to make a decision. So that's an observation that I've seen time and time again.
Well, it's actually quite funny that well, this also is something that many military leaders then also say, right? So I think there's this famous quote of General Patton saying, "Okay, a good decision today is 10 times better than a perfect decision tomorrow."
Yes.
And it's actually quite funny that World War II generals have very good advice for managers in the 21st century.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think sometimes those pearls of wisdom transcend time and industry and space, right? Like what worked then. Yes, like it's absolutely true. Sometimes, making that good enough decision for today, you're right, is going to be better than perfection, next year.
Can you tell us a bit more about what you guys do? So you said you are in
Yeah.
IT security.
Yeah.
I would be curious to learn more.
Yeah, so we say that we're an AI-driven security operations platform. And so when I'm talking to my mom, how I describe that, because my mom is not a tech person at all, I say, Mom, we're a cybersecurity company, and we help the world remain safe. So all of the data and in the information that you submit online, right? It could be in e-commerce and buying things. It could be filling out forms and registering for an event, a concert, like anything, right? Like there's a ton of information that we have out there in the world around us. Unfortunately, there are also folks around the world who have bad intentions and they look to steal identity or infiltrate organizations and do bad things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there are companies like ours in the cybersecurity space that sell products that enable companies to protect their data and mitigate data infiltration, data exfiltration, security breaches, all of that. So succinctly said, that's what we do.
And how do you talk to potential candidates, potential applicants in terms of your value proposition? So why should I join you?
Mm-hmm. So there are many reasons why.
I'm sure.
What I like to focus on is first and foremost, and this is perhaps my own thoughts kind of coming through and being projected upon candidates in some ways. People matter so much.
Mhm.
What we do matters, but the people with whom we do it, I think, matter exponentially more than the actual what we do. Because you can find a lot of great companies out there that do a lot of great things. Fabulous. That's awesome. What really helps to differentiate first and foremost, I think, are the people we get to do this with.
Mhm.
Are the people that you work with honest, authentic, kind, inspiring individuals who are excited to help you learn and grow and have you be a part of the team doing value-adding, productive work. And so first and foremost, I think that's one of our biggest sellers and value props for candidates. Now, outside of that, outside of this ginormous piece of like the people is, oh, by the way, we're in a really hot space at a really hot moment in time doing really cool stuff. So again, those things are important, but I lead with the people component, perhaps not surprisingly, given the nature of my work, but I think that's real. Like we are humans first and we are employees second.
Um, what do you think are the most important trends in HR in the next few years?
In the next few years, so Benjamin, I'm going to say what probably every other person who's listening has heard as well. And I have to say it because it's true. And I think it is part of the trends. Um, $5. Does anyone know? €5. Does anyone know what I'm about to say? It is AI. I do think that
No
that
way.
it stands for artificial intelligence. Let me tell you about it. I think that is something, it can't be ignored, right? Like it's already disrupted our world. I think that it's here to stay. I embrace it. I think that it's a wonderful thing. We just need to learn how to work with AI and leverage it. Because if we don't, we'll be replaced by it. And so I think that it's a actually wonderful thing that has entered our space and world. So I couldn't answer without saying that at least. But
and
then
and
yeah,
I
I have
was
some other
certain
And I will certainly not ask, or as we're certainly not comment how to turn this into a sales pitch for Hyatt. So therefore, let's jump to the next topic.
Yes. Then I would say two other areas that I think are equally important, and I think that's around employee engagement. And part of that is because over the last year or so, many tech companies have done right sizing, or there's been a little bit of a macroeconomic slowdown in the tech sector. And so that means that unlike during the pandemic, when we had the great resignation, when so many people were leaving and it was around employee retention, I think right now it's about employee engagement. So tech companies have optimized and downsized and all sorts of stuff. How do we create a great experience for the employees who are here? That could be through learning and development. That could be through various culture, engagements and activities. How do we do this in what is often a hybrid work environment? I think that, organizations have sort of leveled and steadied themselves around, are we fully remote? Are we in office? Are we hybrid? I think for the most part, companies have kind of figured out their flavor and what they're doing. But now how do we keep people engaged? How do we make sure that our culture is alive and breathing and something that we're all, super stoked about? And then I'd say a third trend that I see continues to be around people analytics. So, in the HR people space, we do have a lot of data coming at us. How do we leverage this data so that we can work smarter and we can also be more predictive around, what could be coming down the road, so that we can get in front of that and be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Perfect. Gianna, thank you so much. I love the last sentence you said in terms of being proactive rather than reactive. I think that, in many HR organizations, I think that's still kind of the daily business or the approach to things, right? And therefore, I think it's very cool to be be active rather than just proactive.
I agree. I totally agree. And thankfully, we live in a tech-enabled, AI-powered world that truly allows us to be a lot more proactive and frankly, just to do some really creative things that historically we've never been able to do. Like the amount of analytics and knowledge we have on employee sentiment, on what moves the needle, on upcoming attrition, like all of these things through the power of analytics and also AI, we're able to glean a lot of information about our workforces, which is great. Like it's a very empowered place to be. And then we can start to do programs and initiatives and things to make sure we retain our people.
Well, and I also like the idea very much to use data to make life of everyone better, right? So if I know what people like, what people are good at, what people perhaps have never envisaged, however, it might be something that could be very, very useful there, that could be very good in a certain position. It's amazing that we now have the data and that we now have the opportunities through AI to learn more what they're really after. How can I kind of create a great experience for them overall? And I think it's amazing. It's an amazing time to be in, not to live in.
Yeah, I think that now is the time to be in the HR people operations world, right? Because we've got the tools, we have the technology. I think there's increased awareness and appreciation in boardrooms and in, executive tables and conversations about the value that we bring and add. So we're no longer fighting for a seat at the table. I think, like how wonderful is that's, not what we're talking about. So yeah, like this is our moment. So I'm excited to be a part of this and also to bring forth all of the others.
Awesome. Gianna, thank you so much for this great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
And you guys, thanks a lot for listening in. I'm sure you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. See you next time.